Hola, buenos días. This is the third video I'm recording for you guys in order to review Spanish 2 grammar before we start Spanish 3, hopefully on May 7th. In this video and the next one, I'm going to focus on the past tenses that you studied last semester. Past tenses in Spanish have a range of nuances that we can express. For example, time, completion, probability, perspective, etc. This means that we can talk about whether actions are finished or ongoing, whether they are happening in a past that we think has no connection with the present, or those actions still have a connection with the present, whether they are hypotheses and we use conditional tenses, or they are not, or whether we are talking about the relationship between several actions or events in the past in terms of time. While English has one tense that expresses what we call simple past, and that generally addresses events, actions, and descriptions of the past, Spanish separates those into two different past tenses, pretérito indefinido and pretérito imperfecto. In this video, we are going to review the use and conjugation of the first of those verb tenses, pretérito indefinido, that is also called pretérito in Mexico, and therefore what you probably heard if you studied with Maria Teresa Sensei or Luis Sensei. But you can also find under the name pretérito perfecto simple in some other books or websites. It's the same tense, it simply has different names depending on the people that are talking about them. How do we use pretérito indefinido? Let's start. Here we have a timeline with pasado, futuro, y ahora. So the past, the future, and now, the now of the person who is speaking. We talk about actions that happen in the past and that we consider as finished. For example, ayer comí a las 4. I'm using pretérito indefinido because if I look at this action in my timeline, I consider it as a finished action, una acción terminada. For me, as I'm using this past tense, it's clear that it started and it finished. Later, we will see how we can actually indicate for how long, because right now, I do not have a particular finish point. I only know when the action started. It started at 4. But when did it finish? I do not know exactly, but because I'm using this past tense, it's clear that the action was finished. My perspective is going to be of looking back after the action is done. For me, the action has no connection with the present. So not only the action is finished, but it's also unrelated to the present. We can indicate something like ayer no hice los deberes, which is a one-time action. In this case, I didn't do the action. Yesterday, I didn't do my homework. But I can also say, leí este libro 2 veces, which is actions that are repeated more than once. I read this book twice. However, remember that when I use pretérito indefinido, I do not consider this action to be a habit. Shukan yanai. If I talk about habits, I will be using pretérito imperfecto. Another characteristic of pretérito indefinido is that I can actually talk about short processes or long processes. These actions or events that I refer here as processes can be short, for example, hice la cena en 2 horas, or they can be long. Viví en Tokio 5 años. If I look at viví en Tokio 5 años in my timeline, I can see that is a long process because I'm including a time marker that is 5 años. 5 años as a time marker indicates a long process, while 2 horas indicates that it was short. I do not know when I started living in Tokyo or when I finished living in Tokyo. What I want to say is for how long I did this. The perspective is again of someone looking back at an action that is considered done, una acción terminada. I consider the process as finished, but I want to express how long it took me to do it. So as a summary, we are talking about finished actions that can be done once or can be done 2-3 times. And I can also indicate how long they took to be done. Okay? Why? Because these are finished actions. I will not be able to do this with pretérito imperfecto. Now, let's look at another characteristic of this tense. Now we see a timeline about el lunes pasado. We tell a story. We use indefinido to indicate the actions that move our narration forward. When we talk about our past, we are actually telling our life. We need to narrate. In Japanese, kataru, right? So, an example would be this. El lunes pasado me desperté tarde. Me duché y me vestí rápidamente. No desayuné y salí de casa, pero perdí el autobús y llegué tarde a clase. We have many verbs here, right? Last Monday, I woke up late, I had a shower and got dressed quickly. I didn't have a breakfast. I got out of the house, but I missed the bus and I got late to class. If I look at the actions, me desperté es número 1, me duché número 2, me vestí número 3, no desayuné número 4, salí de casa número 5, perdí el autobús número 6 y llegué tarde a clase número 7. Why am I giving it a number? Because I'm talking about these actions, these events in last Monday as a sequence, and they are in a chronological order. When I talk about several actions that I did in the past and I use pretérito indefinido, they are necessarily done in a chronological order if I'm using indefinido for each of these verbs. We will see how we can change the order of the actions, but we will need to use other past tenses. I'm still looking back at actions that I perceive as finished, and I'm telling them in a sequence that is always in a chronological order. So here, I'm not interested in telling you for how long I did them, or if I did them once or many times. I'm narrating to you the events that happened to me last Monday, probably in the morning. Now, there is one more thing that we can do with pretérito indefinido. We can refer to qualities or characteristics of a process or event. Now, you may remember that I taught you, or Professor Luis, Professora Maria Teresa taught you, that in order to describe the past, I use the other past tense. However, I can use pretérito indefinido to give the quality or characteristic in this case. El viaje fue genial. The trip was great. Why? If I look at it in my timeline, again, this is a finished action. And what I'm doing is I'm looking back at it and considering the whole process that is already finished. I give it a value. I think, okay, how was the trip? I did this, I ate that, I met these people. In general, as a whole, for me, it was great. That's how we are using it. La cita con Juan fue súper romántica. The date with Juan was super romantic. Mi vida universitaria fue muy interesante. My university life was very interesting. They are all values, qualities of something that I'm looking back and considering from beginning to end as a whole, I consider to be romantic or interesting. So finally, we are going to be looking at the conjugation for this past tense, pretérito indefinido. I'm sure that you remember that this past tense has quite a few irregular verbs. So you need to review and practice in order to remember this again. Verbos regulares, however, are not that complicated. We have verbos AR that are as follow. Yo viajé, tú viajaste, él viajó, nosotros viajamos, vosotros viajasteis y ellos o ustedes viajaron. Haste o, amos, hasteis, aron. This is going to be the conjugation for verbos regulares en AR. Then ER and IR, I put them together because they are actually the same. Look at this. Yo comí, tú comiste, él comió, nosotros comimos, vosotros comisteis y ellos comieron. This is verbo comer, verbo ER. Viví, viviste, vivió, vivimos, vivisteis, vivieron, verbo vivir, verbo ir, and both verbs have the same conjugation. So you only need to remember one form for both er and ir verbs that are regular. Now, besides this, there are some exceptions. These exceptions are still regular verbs, but in the first person, we need to change the spelling because we need to follow spelling rules that you studied in the beginning of Spanish 1. If you don't remember them, it would be a good time now to take a look at them. Now, why do I need this? Because sometimes in the infinitive, I have C with the sound K, atracar, to rob, that in the first person, because this is an AR verb, need to be changed into a Q. It's simply spelling because I need to keep the sound K, K, Ki, Ko, Ku. The same happens here, colgar, colgué, because I need to keep that ga, ge, gi, go, gu sound. Averiguar needs to change into averigüe. Again, there's a rule, G-U-A, actually it's gua, but G-U-E normally is pronounced ge, except for the cases where I include this symbol. We only studied the word pingüino in order to indicate this rule, but now you have another example. Zeta to se will be one of our most used verbs, empezar, to begin, that needs to be changed for the spelling so that I can keep that za, ce, ci, so, su sound. Yo empecé. Almost done. Now let's take a look at verbos irregulares. Verbos irregulares are going to be divided in two big groups and then into different types within those groups. The first group is going to be where only the root or gokan is irregular. These are the verbs that we call verbos con cambio vocálico. Okay? Vowel change, or in Japanese, I think is something like gokan, boin, henkadoshi, or something of the like. You have it in your book if you want to take a look at it in Japanese. This cambio vocálico existed in the present tense as well. But in the past, in indefinido, exists for cambio de E a I with verbos como pedir, yo pedí, tú pediste, él pidió, nosotros pedimos, vosotros pedisteis y ellos pidieron. And in this case, you can see that the conjugation is the same as vivir. Yo pedí, yo viví, tú viviste, tú pediste, él vivió, él pidió. Other examples would be repetir, elegir, servir, mentir, sentirse o reírse. If you look at it, they are all verbos en IR. And in this case, unlike the present, we are going to be looking at only the third person changing. Verbos de cambio O a U. Yo dormí, tú dormiste, él durmió. Nosotros dormimos, vosotros dormisteis, ellos durmieron. Only include dormir and morir. and all of them have changed only in the third person singular and the third person plural. Now, the other big group is verbs that have both the root and the ending as irregular. They still somehow resemble the original verb, and there are rules that apply to many verbs, but both the root and the conjugation are going to be irregular. We have tipo A, verbo estar. Verbo estar becomes yo estuve, tú estuviste, él estuvo, nosotros estuvimos, vosotros estuvisteis y ellos estuvieron. I apologize for the spelling mistake in L. I will fix it for your final PPT. What's important to note is that estar, the original root is est, but is changed into estuve. Moreover, yo hablé will be a regular verb in AR, has a tilde, but here yo estuve is very important because the how we pronounce the verb changes. Yo hablé is strong. Yo estuve, it is not. Yo hablé, tú hablaste, remember? Or él habló. But this is estuve, estuviste, estuvo, estuvimos, estuvisteis, estuvieron. Now, we have many verbs that belong to this type, and they are very important verbs that we use very often. Tener, haber, poder, poner, querer, saber, hacer, venir. These are all very common verbs that are changing as you see here. Not only that, in this type tipo A, it doesn't matter if the verb is an AR, ER, or IR. All of them share the same conjugation. So it's very important that you remember this irregular type. I know it requires memorization, but I think it's important that you do if you want to learn Spanish language. It's okay to make mistakes from time to time, but you already studied this past tense twice. So I expect you to, little by little, be able to remember the conjugation for these verbs because we are not going to review it anymore in the rest of the semester, but they might come up in texts or videos that we are going to be using in the class. The second group for this is tipo B. Verbo decir, which is the main verb that we are going to be using for tipo B, becomes yo dije. Tú dijiste, él dijo, dijimos, dijisteis, dijeron. As you can see, the conjugation is very similar to tipo A, but the third person plural is different. Among these verbs, we have others like traer, to bring, conducir, to drive, traducir, to translate, or contraer, which we use it when you get a sickness. For example, yo contraje un virus. The characteristic that is maybe the most eye-catching is that we are including a J in the root when there was no J in the root for the original verb, for the infinitive. Finally, we have what we call irregulares totales. In this case, verbo ser y verbo ir, if you remember, they are the same. They look the same. Yo fui could be I was or I went. Tú fuiste, you were, or you went. Él fue, he was, he went. Remember that the way to distinguish is when we look at the sentence. If it's verbo ir, we will need to see the place that we went to. So I will have a sentence like yo fui a la universidad ayer, where a la universidad is telling me that this is verbo ir. Verbo dar, yo di, tú diste, él dio, nosotros dimos, vosotros disteis y ellos dieron. By itself is irregular total because it's not following the rules for regular verbs and it doesn't follow the rules for any of the other irregular types. Now it's time for you to study, review these conjugations, and try to do the quizzes practice that I prepare for you. Okay, I hope that this video was useful as a review, and if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Gracias.